Hey everyone, Firegrass here, and today we're going to be talking about how the Trade League meta is probably going to change for the next couple of years. Now what I want to talk about first is how I think horizontal farming strategies are pretty much going to become the meta by default, and vertical strategies for the most part won't even exist anymore. Now what do I mean by vertical strategies? Well, let's take Harbinger for example. In the past you would stack all of the available Harbinger synergies on top of each other. You would take all of the Harbinger nodes on the particular region you were farming, you would take all of the Harbinger related watchstones, then you would add scarabs, you would sometimes add sextant mods, etc. You would just stack everything Harbinger related, and you would run a map with all the Harbinger stuff on it. You can't really do this as much anymore, right? Watchstones are going, and we're going to have a big tree that gives us access to synergies for a lot of different mechanics at the same time. We're no longer sort of limited and all that, and I'll go into that in the slide, but basically, that's what I mean by vertical, and horizontal strategies are going to be farming lots of different mechanics with a lower amount of synergies, right? So you're going to have a larger spread, but the concentration into each mechanic is going to be lower. And this is just a mock-up of what that might look like on an Atlas tree that you would make up. So this one, we're taking Expedition, Harbinger, Legion, and Breach. You're going to, for example, be farming all four of these at the same time. Now, this isn't what I'm recommending, and you're probably going to take different nodes if you wanted to farm this particular, these particular strategies, but this is just to give you an idea of what it might look like, right? So you would just basically be taking like all of the Expedition, all of the Legion, all of the Breach, all of the Harbinger clusters, and it particularly it works better when all of the mechanics you want are on the same side of the tree or are close to each other, as is the case here. So we have 31 points left over, when doing it this way. This means that we only need to complete around, I believe, 100 maps, or rather receive 100 points, which means we don't really have to do any of the Maven related stuff. We could complete the entire Atlas without all the unique maps and stuff like that, and we would get like 100 points roughly and be able to do all that. And so yeah, you would put in an Expedition Scarab, a Breach Scarab, a Legion Scarab, a Harbinger Scarab, and then take all of these nodes, and then you would go into a map and farm all four of these mechanics, and that would just be how you farm, right? Now, we're going to talk about why this is the case. So in the past, these horizontal strategies were limited by region, they were limited by Atlas passive points, and by watchstones. If you wanted to farm Legion and Breach together, you couldn't really do that. The good nodes for both of these different types of mechanics were in completely different regions to start off with, and you could only pick one set of watchstones. Now, you could go half and half, but you were just sort of diluting the amount of synergy you were getting for each individual mechanic. And even if, for example, there was a mechanic that didn't require watchstones, and it didn't, that you managed to get them in the same region, well then you still had to allocate 3 points to one mechanic and 2 points to the other. So I can't really think of many examples where you were able to farm two different mechanics at once at top efficiency. You usually had one mechanic that you were able to farm at greater strength than the other, and it was better to just focus on that thing you could farm at maximum strength, since that was what was producing the highest profit per hour. Now, those limitations don't exist anymore, since regions are gone. The Atlas passive points are basically just global, and watchstones are gone. Now, the best strategies are probably going to just simply involve stacking lots of mechanics into the same map. Now, it doesn't even necessarily have to be 4. With the map device and other tools such as the new map implicits and stuff, there may be room to farm 5 different mechanics at once. If you look at Essence, for example, Essence will just guarantee 1 free Essence mod onto every map, and you might find a way to farm, 6 mechanics on every map. So we're not necessarily limited to 4 at all, and these strategies will be easier to pull off if the mechanics are all on the same side of the tree. As I sort of mentioned when we looked at the tree, we only had 31 points left. Now, even if you had a fully completed Atlas, it would be very hard to start splitting the different strategies you were doing between both sides of the tree. It would be possible, it would just be difficult, and you had less wiggle room to put points into other things that you thought were interesting or beneficial to, maximizing efficiency for that particular strat. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is Alch Go. I don't have a mock-up tree to sort of show you for this, but you also don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand this one. So the premise here is that Alch Go is massively increased in value. You can, in the next patch and in future patches, you're just going to be able to alch your map and run it, pretty much, and as long as you have points allocated on the tree, you're going to be able to make a decent amount of profit. I was going through this with some other top-level juices, and we estimated that it would be easily possible to get around 10 Chaos Orbs per map just passively without investing a single thing into your map outside of an Alchemy Orb. Now, why is this the case? Well, it's basically because you can stack all of the different nodes on the tree that gives you an extra chance to encounter specific mechanics. So there are things that increase the chance of encountering a Legion monolith, things that increase the chance of encountering breaches, Expedition, pretty much every mechanic you can think of, every past league mechanic that has existed in the game and gone core in the end, there's a way to increase the chance of encountering that mechanic. So when you go into a map, you're going to have a fairly high chance to encounter a bunch of mechanics, since there's already a base chance of, I think it's like 5 or 8% or something along those lines. So yeah, you're basically going to have, every map you run, you're just going to get a bunch of mechanics for free. And on top of that, you're going to have a lot of nodes that increase the power of those mechanics, providing you're smart about how you spend your points. This also means low investment juicing is going to be very popular, so there are still a lot of things like Abyss Scarabs, Shaper Scarabs, Elder Scarabs, etc. that you can bulk buy them for like half a C each in a lot of cases, and you can just chuck them into your maps. Metamorph Scarabs are another one, and you're just going to be getting tons of mechanics every single map you run. You're not going to have to spend a lot of time trading in order to set these maps up like you would with, say, Nemesis 3 or stuff like that. These are just, you would invest, 2 minutes trading, and then you can just map for like the rest of the day pretty much without thinking, and you're going to be making a ton of money. Now, here's the sort of downside to all this, though. There is a very low barrier to entry and very high accessibility, and that means that the prices for all of the rewards for these mechanics are going to be a lot lower, a lot faster. Now, there is, for example, a Legion node. This already exists, but it's just an example of what I'm talking about. It increases the duration of the sort of stasis timer. So once you click on the monolith and then can pop mobs out, you get 40% extra duration there, and then you also have 50% increased damage to the target. So it's easy to break things out, you have longer to break things out, and there are a lot of those sorts of nodes along the, for the various mechanics that make the mechanics easier to interact with rather than harder. And this is kind of a problem because it means everyone is going to be able to access this sort of stuff. Now, as you know, I'm a huge fan of casuals accessing mechanics and stuff, but if everyone in the game is farming all of the same stuff, basically the profit margin is going to be very thin. Now, you may be a casual player sitting at home thinking I'm just being an elitist and complaining that people are going to, be ruining the different things that I'm going to be farming. Not at all the case. I have things planned that have nothing to do with this. I'm actually more talking about you guys, because you may be excited about the prospect of farming Legion and Breach, etc. all at once, but when you're farming these things and making only a few Chaos Orbs per map because everything is worth nothing, you're not going to be very happy about this, and it's going to make this system feel bad pretty fast. So this is just something to sort of consider. It doesn't necessarily mean this is going to be the case right out the gate. It may take a couple of weeks for this to sort of end up this way, but I am concerned about the replayability of this sort of content, given the way that there are pretty much no gear requirements and no progression requirements anymore. Any casual player is going to be able to access this stuff, and in a lot of cases that's actually bad for casual players, because if they're all accessing this stuff, the things that they're accessing are not going to be worth anything. Now, farming maps with little to no investment is probably going to keep the scarab demand down. There's going to be a lot of demand for scarabs, especially since you can farm, 4 scarabs worth of mechanics at once now, and if farming maps with no investment ends up becoming popular, you're probably going to see that help keep the demand for scarabs down, which may be a little bit healthier for the economy. It may be healthy for differentiating the middle to lower class, and I would think that's a good thing, right? And then the other thing to talk about is that rewards for completing maps is up, and that leads me into the next thing that I want to talk about. So the next thing that I want to talk about is map boss farming, and I have been waiting for this to pop off for a long time. If you have followed my stream and my content for a while, you know that I kind of attempt this every league, and I'm a big fan of this sort of thing, and it looks like now is the time, basically. So what map boss farming basically comes down to is the idea that going into a map and just killing most of the things you encounter along the way, skipping the league mechanics and then making sure to kill the boss, is the way to derive most of the profit out of the map. And that also comes with the added effect of not having to alch your maps, right? So you can run scoured maps for the most part, hopefully sustain your map pool, and you're going to be getting most of the rewards out with the least amount of effort. I'm a big fan of it, even though it's going to probably ruin the economy if too many people pick up on it. And why do I think this is coming back? Well, we'll get into that with the slide, but I just wanted to show you an example Atlas passive tree for what that might look like, right? So in this case, we've gotten 70% chance worth of additional connected maps to drop from unique map bosses. This is important because basically means out of 10 maps that we run, 7 of the map bosses are going to drop adjacent maps. And if we're favoriting 2 maps that are adjacent to each other, something only I happen to know, because I'm the only one who did the experimenting and the data collection for this particular thing, is that adjacent map drops based on the boss kills, something that already exists as part of Awakener bonus, that's affected by favorited maps only as long as the favorited maps are eligible, as in they're adjacent, right? So if you have two maps that are adjacent to each other and you favorite, you're running one map and you favorite the one adjacent to it, whenever a map boss drops an adjacent map, it's almost always going to be the one that's favorited. And this is a much bigger point now since regions are gone and you can just sort of, you basically, if you have two maps that you really like and you want to farm lots of them, now you may not be able to self-sustain a single map, but the tools available to the Atlas now make it really easy to sustain two maps because you can favorite 6 and 6 or just favorite 12 and then swap between them, and basically all of the adjacent map drops are going to be the other map that you favorited. So you can keep swapping between these two maps, especially if you take a lot of these minor nodes, which may end up being a viable thing if map boss farming becomes a thing. So why would map boss farming work? Well, map bosses are going to be able to drop generic currency items, Atlas-based currency items, I presume like sextants and scouting reports and stuff like that. They're now going to have a 4% chance to drop a scarab. Not a big deal, but it's still worth, it's still something, right, for sure. Now, they're also going to be able to drop Guardian and Synth maps as before, but the chance to drop Synth maps is now a total of 1.5% bonus. So this is going to be higher than what we previously had. As well as that, they're now able to drop Conqueror maps. Now, I expect Conqueror maps to be worth more than the Guardian maps, which is, like a huge influx of additional profit per map that you run. As mentioned previously, up to 70% chance for an adjacent map to drop. Now, you're probably not going to get all the travel nodes like I did in that example mockup, but you may get some extra ones you don't necessarily need just to bump this chance up to make it feel, good, depending on the strategy, of course. And there's also going to be a chance to drop faded uniques. So it looks like the main way to drop faded items is going to be through killing map bosses now, since there is a node specifically dedicated towards farming faded uniques. Now, on top of that, map completion is going to grant you additional access to Eldritch Altars. This is good for a whole bunch of reasons, right? The more maps that you're able to farm, the more commonly you're able to access Eldritch Altars. Eldritch Altars will spawn in maps that are affected by Eldritch mobs and influenced by like the new Eldritch bosses. And on top of that, all of the Eldritch Altars apparently are going to have an option that allows you to buff the map boss in return for gaining a new currency item or some kind of bonus, right? So you're going to be able to like super juice up the map boss and then get like a ton of loot out of just the map boss. On top of that, you're going to be able to farm boss keys. As mentioned before, this is kind of like when we used to do Alch Go, but we actually had to kill Cirrus every time we procced Cirrus, and we had to kill the Conquerors every time we procced the Conquerors. Now you can just take a mapping character and farm the shit out of your maps, and when you proc the mini bosses and the Eldritch bosses, you just sell the key off to some other, person who wants to run them and is playing a bossing character, and yeah, you get back to mapping. I'm a big fan. My hat goes off to GGG. I'm very much looking forward to exploring this in the later weeks. Obviously, this isn't going to be a viable league start strategy, probably, if you're interested in farming like a day 3 mirror, mage blood or stuff like that. But yeah, this is going to be really good during like week 2, week 3, week 4. Lots of passive currency for you if you just focus on map boss farming. Now, map boss farming doesn't mean you are literally just running to the map boss and killing the map boss. You're going to kill the mobs along the way, especially with the way Eldritch Altars work. You are going to have to kill mobs in order to spawn subsequent Eldritch Altars or something along those lines, apparently. So, yeah, it's not totally for free that you just only tunnel the map boss, but the idea is that you're going to ignore all the other mechanics. You're going to be grinding through your maps really fast, and hopefully with the way the new Atlas is going to work, you're going to be able to easily sustain your map pool now, which has always been like the main difficulty of this thing. The main difficulty here was that you still had to out your maps in order to try and sustain your map pool, and if you were ignoring all the other mechanics on the map, you were still probably under-sustaining. But now, the thing is, just with the 70% chance alone for an adjacent map drop, if you took all those nodes, you're almost just sustaining from that. If you add on the additional chance to duplicate your map drops, that alone, with all the minor nodes, would basically be your maps permanently sustained. Not even including all of the maps that you're going to drop naturally. So this is a really big deal. I'm very much looking forward to this, and so should you, because I think this is, down the line, going to become a very popular way to play the game. This is the last thing I want to talk about, but I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's basically the idea that I think a lot of the top players are going to be pushed into the Uber content. With the increased accessibility to all of the Atlas passives, and the fact that there's just not a very high barrier of entry to a lot of the content being released, I don't think the top players are going to want to, stick around and continue farming Atlas-related stuff when the rest of the player base is going to be touching on that sort of stuff. So, Uber Blight rewards are being buffed, in case you missed it in the patch notes. So I think a lot of players are going to start looking into that. Now, I did it last league, and it was very profitable, and it was also kind of enjoyable. If they're buffing it, that's going to be great. So we already had a strategy worked out. That could easily work out to about 6 exalts per hour if you were min-maxing. The fact that it's going to now be more means you could consistently potentially be looking at like 8 exalts per hour worth of farming, and it is a nice and relaxing farm if you have a build that can handle the Blight boss as well and all that sort of stuff. So Tornado Shot Occultist is going to be a big one on my list because it was a very good Blight farmer. I tried a couple builds for this Blight farming, and yeah, Tornado Shot Occultist was just by far the dominant option. I'm probably going to just re-roll Tornado Shot Occultist if, Ravaged Blight map farming ends up being a thing. More Simulacrum viable builds are known now. Going into last patch, we didn't really have much of an idea of what the sort of damage and defense requirements were for wave 20 to 30, right? And a lot of builds that thought they were previously Simulacrum viable, it turned out they weren't, right? They weren't able to cap high enough to handle all of the additional mods added on top. And, if you've ever dealt with a wave 29 or a wave 30 Croesus, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Finishing a Simulacrum can be very hard. So, going into this patch, basically, a lot of people are going to be playing builds that they already know can get very far into a Simulacrum. And it's not very important that you can actually complete a Simulacrum, but it is important that you can get to at least wave 25 and onwards. If you're getting to wave 25 and onwards, the profit makes it sort of worth farming. I think a lot of top players are going to feel like this is going to be like the go-to farming strat for a lot of players, and this is also why a lot of people are even playing Explosive Arrow next league, because they know they're going to be able to scale up their Explosive Arrow builds into a Simulacrum viable character. Delve only mods are gaining a lot of value from the Eldritch implicits that are coming into the game. So if you think about it, previously when you got a +1 Spectre chest, there wasn't a lot you could do with this item. You had to 6-link it yourself manually, and then trying to roll other stuff onto it was kind of difficult, because you might, in a lot of cases you were maybe slamming a Conqueror Exalt onto it, and maybe hoping for the best. Maybe you're trying to gamble and null it and then multi-mod over the top of it. It was hard to get a lot of value out of these items. That's not the case anymore. Once you get these delve-only mods dropping on your body armor, your helmet, gloves, boots, etc., you can then stick Eldritch implicits onto it, and you can deterministically craft on the side of the item that isn't affected by the delve-only mod. So if you have a delve-only prefix, you can still keep recrafting your suffixes with a decent amount of determinism, right? And on top of that, you're going to have 2 guaranteed mods that you're really happy with, that feel really impactful potentially for your build. So delve-only mods are a lot more attractive. I feel like between this and also the fact that farming the Atlas is going to be less attractive, I think a lot more people are going to be looking into doing delve in the coming league. And then on top of that, right, this probably isn't a surprise for anyone, but Uber Legion and Uber Breach, they probably still suck. They sucked last league, and they're probably going to continue to suck, right? There's the rewards for this type of content just didn't seem all too much there. The price to even try this content was just pretty high. I think they're going to continue remaining as a really niche thing. The Uber Legion in particular just seems like the biggest jackpot in the entire game, where if you have a ton of money, maybe you're going to gamble on Uber Legion and you're going to sell 5-way spots for Uber Legion type content in order to try and get a stasis prison. Other than that, I think these two types of Uber content are they're just basically dead. And the fact that they have this experience component tied into them means that they're always just going to be there as faster ways to earn experience for 5-way, for 6-man groups and stuff like that. It's like the 5-way farmers would put some of their unrelenting emblems, I can't remember what they're called. But yeah, basically they're just always going to be a tool for grinding XP, basically, and the people farming them are going to hopefully drop the chase unique associated with them to try and recoup some of their costs. I don't really like the way these are designed at all. I actually think the experience component of them should maybe be entirely removed so that they can remain as the Uber content for solo players, but it's kind of whatever. We have enough to go off with what already exists. I'm not too fussed about this. But yeah, I basically think Uber content is going to become a lot more relevant, just given the fact that all of the rest of the game was kind of collapsed on itself. The deep endgame progression from the Maven content is effectively gone. You're not going to be continuing to finish off your Atlas and all your Maven passives a week into the game. I think you're going to be done by like day 2 or 3 in a lot of cases. If you're a top level player, it's very feasible that you're going to have most of this progression done by the time you go to sleep on the first day now. So, yeah, Uber content going to be much more important. If you're thinking about what your league start should be, and you're the kind of player that likes farming upwards of 10 mirrors a league, start thinking about Uber content, because this is your future, I think. I hope you guys found this video very insightful. I'm going to have more videos on the Atlas tree once we're able to theorycraft more stuff, but that's going to require it coming out on POB, where we can allocate more than 1 point at a time. The current implementation is sort of very finicky, and I don't like it very much at all. It takes quite a while to just allocate a whole bunch of points, yet since you have to click every node individually, you can't just allocate, say, 10 at a time, and that's holding back a lot of theory crafting at the moment, based on, what I'm hearing from other people. So we will get more videos on this, and I will basically talk about any strategy that enters my radar. I think Blight's something that everyone should be looking at the moment, as well as everything mentioned in this video. I am pretty confident about the predictions I made in this video, and I also have a pretty, I have a pretty unblemished history of making correct economic predictions. I'm also one of the top currency owners in Trade League, so I would be very surprised if I was wrong about anything that was said here today. But if you did find this video insightful, give me a like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.